look, the United States shouldn't be funding either Israel or the war in Ukraine or any of these places. One of the things that's been some research or some discoveries have suggested that some of the arms used by Hamas came from Ukraine, and they got a hold of these weapons through a black market from Ukrainian military ministers who sold them, and probably at discounted rates to Hamas militants. So we create these problems all over the world. So that funding to Ukraine and the funding to Israel, and this is not to single out Israel. I would stop all foreign aid altogether. And first and foremost, although not only, but first and foremost, all military aid, because this is only increasing military tensions around the world.
Yeah.
We're arming the enemies of the enemies of the enemies. I mean, we're arming every side. It's ridiculous. You know, we actually produced ISIS out of the Libyan crisis and the overthrow of Gaddafi. The arms that were left over there were gotten a hold of by these Islamic terrorists, and they formed ISIS out of this. So we created ISIS, for goodness sakes. Then we armed them, and then we armed their opponents, who were also terrorists. Okay, so we had two sides fighting each other who were both armed by us. This is what's been going on all over the world. And I could go in detail, but it's too, too much detail will lose the forest for the trees. The point being that we're arming every side of almost every conflict in the world.
Yeah, and people who've had U.S. either weapons or military forces come into their country, they don't think favorably about us. They don't think, there's the world police, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's right.
People in Afghanistan and Iraq and all over the Middle East, and like you said, Libya, and what do you think Russians are going to think in 10 years from now about the United States? You know, you can't fault them for being pissed off at us because they're like so clearly being taken, as an enemy of the United States. Yeah, so what would you say to someone who says, well, we're the United States, we have to be the police person of the world, we have to spread democracy around the world?
No, well, first of all, we have not spread anything like democracy. We have propped up dictators in various countries, and we propped up Saddam Hussein in the first place, then took him out. We propped up a dictator in Iran, then took him out. We've propped up dictators all over the world. But furthermore, what we should be doing is instead, we should be the beacon of on the hill for liberty. What we should be doing is making friends through trade, through exchange. How do you build a social cohesion in the world? There's nothing more powerful than having trusted trading partners and creating more complementary exchange such that both parties gain something from an exchange. Because why do you exchange money for something? Because that something has more value to you than the money. And the same thing goes for those who receive it. The money has more value to them than the thing they're holding. Otherwise, they wouldn't make the exchange. This is what we need to do. And exchanges are reciprocal in terms of benefit. So we need to benefit people through exchange and practice the free market in all the world. This would make the United States the friend of everybody. Instead, we're the enemy of many. And we're losing friends daily. Look at the BRICS coalition and what they're doing and trying to pull away from the U.S. dollar.
Could you just explain that real quick?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have Russia, China, and other countries creating a currency that is partially backed by gold to try to pull away from the U.S. dollar as the lingua franca of the world, the chosen currency for exchange, international trade. So, and that is going to, that's having, should that become really strong, that would have an enormous impact on the U.S. citizenry. because a lot of our benefits actually accrue to the fact that we are the medium, the dollar's the medium exchange. So people want the U.S. dollar and they hold the U.S. dollar, and this causes demand, and this increases our wealth. So this has to end in terms of what we're doing in the world. We have to demilitarize the world by virtue of stopping all this foreign aid to countries, especially countries that are in conflict with other countries or other peoples, like in the Middle East. All the money we've spent, and look how it failed apparently in Israel. We funded their Iron Dome, and it didn't work. We're funding their their intelligence agencies apparently through this $3.8 billion. We've funded their military, and it failed. So it either failed or I won't go there, but there's other hypotheses about what happened there. But it's just an outrage that they allowed somehow this attack to get through. There's big calls in Israel, even from parts of in Israel itself, that this was a massive failure on the part of the government, and it's not being taken lightly. They're calling out Netanyahu and his government for failing to protect the Israeli citizens, and they're failing to protect them despite all this aid that the U.S. has been giving them, military aid, over all these years.
Yeah, and let's not lose sight that Israel is not like a third world country. They're an extremely well-developed, successful country. Their GDP is very high. Their GDP per capita is like very similar to the United States. They're one of the wealthier small countries in the world. So this like idea that we need to like fund their army, it's like what I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu, he was just bragging on a podcast that I listened to about how successful his country is. They have all the tech, they have all the startups, they have all the developments. Great, like tax them and run your own military. Like I personally, again, I'm way more in favor of spending our money in some discretionary places if the United States can get out of this enormous debt hole that we're in. Like you don't get to have the fun until you get out of the debt.
Well, we're funding all this. Look at the infrastructure in the United States, dilapidated, falling apart, decrepit. I mean, this country's was being put together with Scotch tape at this point, being held together with Scotch tape. The fissures in our infrastructure are enormous and dilapidated and antiquated. It's an outrage. So if you're going to have a state, at least have it serve the people who live in it.
Right. Yeah, and what is it, like almost 75, 80, almost towards $100 billion have gone to Ukraine. And can we say that that's been successful? I mean, some people would say, you've weakened Russia. It's like, why do we still have this idea that Russia's our enemy?
Why do we need to weaken Russia? They're going to end up, I hope, finally negotiating something that they would have reached from the very start. So the whole thing will have been in vain. All this funding and all this death, all these refugees, 6 million refugees out of the country, 8 million within it, destruction of their infrastructure. Basically, we're using Ukraine as a staging area to launch a regime change in Russia, really. That's really what this is about.
Yep. And it's sad. Like you said, hundreds of thousands of young men and women and children have all died. And it's for what? Like maybe a small region will change hands, maybe, to be determined, not to mention the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent, across the world to get kind of nowhere. And that's, frustrating for me, because again, you bring it back to the American, side of things. Obviously, it's extremely sad. There's lives being lost there, but Americans are hurting. Americans are in poverty. Americans are having tough time purchasing new homes and cars and gas and taking care of their children. Child care is more expensive than ever. and we're sending all this money, to a place that you and I have probably never been. I've never been to Ukraine. I've never been to Russia. I don't know any Ukrainians or Russians. I'm sure they're great people, but we got great people here in Ohio that I want to take care of. And that's what I'm trying to do as a business owner, is take care of my people. And I don't want the government making it harder on me and taking, 39% of everything I owe, and then another couple of percentage points to my state, and the final 2% going to my city. Why is it even like that? Why don't I give my 40% to my city?